Okay, we have an opening at 7, so we are starting punctually. Good evening. I'm Sylvia Liska, and on behalf of the Secession Friends, I warmly welcome you to our artist talk between Jeremy Shaw and Carson Chan. There's still a seat here and seats here. I would take them if I were you. When Jeremy suggested that we invite Carson for this conversation, we were thrilled, since Carson has known and followed Jeremy's work closely for over 15 years. We are so happy, Carson, that you could make the time to come to Vienna for this event. Welcome. A few words of introduction. Carson Chan studied architecture at Cornell University and the history and theory of architecture at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. He's presently pursuing his PhD at Princeton, and his current research focuses on the intersection of environmentalism and aquarium architecture in post-war America. Carson was the founding director of the Emilio Ambas Institute for the Joint Study of the Built and Natural Environment, and he served as curator in the Department of Architecture and Design at the Museum of Modern Art. In 2023, he conceived the widely acclaimed exhibition Emerging Ecologies, Architecture and the Rise of Environmentalism at MoMA, which I have seen and was fantastic. As a curator or executive director, he has been involved in over 30 international exhibitions focused on architecture, art, and design. His writings are widely published, and I won't list the magazines here or books or catalogs. Jeremy Shaw, born in Vancouver, is based in Berlin. He works across the widest range of media to explore altered states of consciousness and the universal human desire for transcendence. Here at the Secession, in our gallery space, his exhibition is titled Towards Logarithmic Delay. The 3 installations he presents could, in theory, offer a mode of escape into another dimension, yet Jeremy ensures that they remain firmly grounded in the here and now of the exhibition space. The works installed here highlight the physical side of his practice. The notions of transcendence and devotions are expressed through a visual lexicon of glass, steel, light, and shadow. I'm happy to announce that we do have the opportunity to see his work on film next Friday at the Momok Cinema at 6 p.m. Jeremy Shaw's extensive list of exhibitions reflects just how busy he is. I definitely won't read the entire list, but I'd like to mention some of his solo exhibitions at institutions such as the Centre Pompidou, MoMA PS1, MAC Montreal, the Schinkel Pavilion in Berlin, and Mona in Tanzania. Very exotic. His work has also been featured in major international group exhibitions, including the 57th Venice Biennale, the 16th Lyon Biennale, and Manifeste 11 in Zurich. His works are part of important museum collections such as MoMA New York, Centre Pompidou, Tate Modern, Bundeskunsthalle Bonn, the National Gallery in Ottawa, Aarhus Kunstmuseum, and the Musée des Beaux-Arts in Montreal. His latest large-scale work, based on film, was acquired by the Hamburger Bahnhof Berlin, and we hear that it is an absolute must-see. So off to Berlin, we must go. Since our 3 exhibitions are Janne Müller in the main hall, Francis Hoffmann in the graphic cabinet, and Jeremy Shaw here in the gallery will be opening at 7 p.m., we should begin our conversation right now. We warmly invite you to attend the opening where all 3 artists will be present. Thank you, and I wish you all a pleasant evening.
So we're going to go like this, yeah?
Yeah.
All right. Let's do it.
Are we on?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, so thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Sylvie, for the invitation. Thank you, Jeremy, for the invitation for me to come here and to talk to you about your exhibition. In many ways, it's really fitting, I think, for us to be sitting here in the basement where your show is. The show is about the subconscious in many ways. So to go subterranean, to think about the subconscious seems all the more fitting. You have to physically go underground to understand the work. And I hope we get a chance to talk about the exhibition design as well, as it's a really big part of the exhibition. The bench that you see right when you walk into the exhibition becomes part of the work that you'll all get to see in a moment. The unfinished walls of the exhibition literally shows that you're in a space of becoming. So like other kind of religious spaces, we're becoming something else. This space is becoming something else. It's transportive. And so maybe to start, I was thinking, you've spent more or less the last decade devoted to making video installations. And so this exhibition is a departure from that. Where in this exhibition, we see objects, we see installations, we see stained glass, candles, a Klein bottle sculpture. So maybe you can tell us a little bit, how did you conceive of this moment of departure from video installations? How are we now moving into sculptures?
I think that, I've always had the studio element to my practice, no matter if I was making films or not. But yes, the installations sort of took precedence over the past years. But since phase shifting index, what she just referred to, which is it's a 7-channel, immersive installation. Ever since making that in 2020, I've kind of taken sort of a break from making moving image works and have been focused in the studio. So it's really, I think that it was actually, I don't know if it was conscious, but it almost just sort of happened that I lost my desire to be making moving image works for a while and started to, these filmic works are really, really, really loaded conceptually. They're full of, I'm pulling from many, many ideologies and influences and interests and kind of smashing them into these films that look like outmoded documentaries. So from when I've moved into the studio realm, it's more like I'm pulling out specific elements from those films and trying to magnify them and amplify them into a physical realm. So that's really this show is a result of the last few years of working in a more sculptural sense through themes that are explored in the films, but that are pursued in a more precise manner. I don't know if precise is the right word. More amplified manner,
Right.
I guess. A physical manifestation.
You've seen this throughout your career, right? There's always echoes of things coming up again.
Definitely, yeah.
This film that I don't know if you guys are going to show it next week, but The Transition Will Never End.
No.
Is basically, so I'll describe it. It's basically a super cut of scenes of transformation, of transposition, of, for example, like time travel, traveling to different universes. So it's always kind of depicted as a kind of vortex, in a lot of films and TV shows. And so we see elements of this in this show popping up.
Yeah.
In the large stained glass window, it's a kind of, as if, a kind of like a 2D planes that we're traveling through. And in the votive candles, we see a kind of transformation as well. Tell us about this process of like this kind of recursion that happens in.
Well, yeah, that film that he's referring to is called "This Transition Will Never End," and it's just an archive of any time in a film or television show that I see the vortex being used, or the wormhole, or this tunneling inward, sort of spiraling illustration that's being used to illustrate the transition from one reality to another, whether that's from sober to high, or like you said, through time travel, whatever it is. It's this really universally understood illustration of something that's technically undocumentable, right? We all understand what this means, but to be able to actually capture this is something we're not really able to do yet, and so we rely on effects. And so it's been a recurring theme, is the inability to translate or represent these, or to illustrate these experiences. And so yeah, the wormhole is back here in the stained glass work and in the candle piece as well. Something that that goes all the way back to DMT or whatever. And this notion of this inability to translate experiences, and falling into cliches, falling into tropes as a way to illustrate these things.
Do we have a clip of DMT? Shall we?
Yeah, definitely.
Look at that together.
I have this like massive presentation here that I can kind of. So, should I just play a video of it?
Let's watch it together.
should I set this up here? So this is a clip from. I'll keep it down in volume because I'm going to talk. It's a clip from a piece from 2004 called DMT, which is a 8-channel video installation in which you see subjects high on the hyperhallucinogenic drug dimethyltryptamine, or DMT. And DMT, when it hits you properly, basically takes you out of your reality so far that there's this death of ego, loss of sense of self, complete disconnect from your present reality as you know it. And the drug, when it hits you properly, within about 30 seconds, you're higher than you'll ever be. And then in a similar way, after 6 to 15 minutes or so, you'll come down within 30 seconds to a minute. So it's really like this incredibly intense, straight up and straight down experience. And so what you're seeing here is somebody who's taken the drug, and the only explanation, or the only instructions that I gave to everyone was to, the second that you start to regain some type of connection to this reality, try and start explaining to me what you witnessed or what you experienced. And so you're reading his immediate post-trip recollection of the experience, which is very fraught a lot of the time. It's very, language is sort of failing everyone when they're attempting to describe the experience.
DMT is also in this show.
It is in the show. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. 20 years later,
Yeah.
I've returned to the drug.
What's interesting, a week and a half ago, we talked about this. Michael Pollan in The New Yorker wrote an article about how there was an experiment to get religious leaders to take drugs, to take psilocybin, mushrooms, basically. There was a priest, a rabbi, an imam, and a Buddhist monk. The joke was
Sounds
right
like a
itself,
joke.
right? But they all went into this experiment, and coming out, most of them said that they had religious experience. And so this, reading this made me think of a few things connected to your work. One is that it seems that artists, always anticipated or intuited so many of the truths that we now know. And secondly, perhaps the distinction between a religious experience and a psychedelic or chemically induced one is an artificial distinction, an artificial construction. I think it's something that you've explored a lot. That we can get ecstatic experiences from going to a club or a rave as much as religious experiences. So thinking about how even the word ecstasy is in both devotional practices and in drug use. I'm also thinking about like media addiction. The idea of that we create our own dopamine by scrolling through Instagram or Flickr or whatever, and creating our own. Doom scrolling. Bringing a whole kind of theological thinking into this kind of idea of self-addiction. And so, seeing the show, seeing how the physical manifestation of religious artifacts, I'm almost tempted to say that all of your work, can be understood religiously. Yeah, I don't know if this is something that you wanted to talk about. Maybe before we get into that, you could talk about, before we talk about this show specifically and the religious kind of implications of that, we can talk about the Quantification trilogy a little bit, because I think it sets up this idea of devotion and, extrasensory, extra kind of bodily kind of experiences.
Sure.
Yeah.
The Quantification trilogy is actually what I'm going to be showing next week at the at MUMOC next week on the 6th, and that's a jump there. It's a series of short films that I created between 2014 and 2018 that all they basically use the aesthetics of outmoded documentary film. As a way to, sorry, I've just lost my train of thought. They basically, use the aesthetics of outmoded documentary as a way to discuss many, many, many different topics that I'm really interested in, and sort of fuse them together in these succinct, autonomous feeling films. So it's a way for me to discuss religion, technology, science, hedonism, etc., all within this one kind of non-hierarchical place by sort of sandwiching them in there. And they're all set in the future, but look like they're taking place in the past. So I can just play a clip here quickly, just to see this sort of. This is from the first one, which is called Quickeners.
I mean, I think it's interesting also to to describe them a little bit too, because as a body of work that you've done for such a long time, just before this moment, I wonder if we can kind of read a bit of this show, through the kind of experience of making this kind of your.
Oh yeah, you want it up or down? Off. Okay. Sure. Yeah, it's just there's one thing you should see though, is that they're speaking.
And we have often folks in this night, far and low, around about 3 miles or minutes, and folks from Logan, assistant workmen, and folks are fans. And this blow, we Miller, and Smoke Hill, better way, runs about 3 here, just about 20 miles or place way. We've them from over Lucas, low. We got about 6, we got here, we have some, they are done, if you think that they.
I'll pull it down. So I'll pull it down. I just wanted you to see the language that's going on there. So yeah, these films, this is the first in the trilogy, and it's called Quickeners. And this is actually the only one that does use archival material as its basis. And so what I did with this film is it's actually footage from a 1967 cinema verite film called Holy Ghost People that documents the religious service of a group of Pentecostal Christian snake handlers in West Virginia in the 60s. And what they do is they, as a testament to their faith, they handle poisonous snakes at the sort of peak of their service. And so what I did was took the film and reworked it into this science fiction narrative that's set 500 years in the future, in which humanity has evolved into a new form called quantum humanity that is basically a merging of man and machine. And has lost all, basically has lost all irrational thought. So everything they do is rational. So with that is the death of faith and art and anything that we kind of, or many of the things we hold dear. And so what is happening in this piece is that this small group of these quantum humans are actually have a disorder that's making them want to be human again. So they're starting to experiment with doing things that humans did, and that's religious service, etc., and handling snakes. And this was the genesis of the work, and this is where I evolved or developed a lot of strategies, including that manipulation of the language, and this overdub of a narrator.
Of praise, causing the manifestation of HAS symptoms to appear to swell.
So there's always this kind of voice of God, BBC-style narration that goes on, situating you in the situation, directly addressing the viewer. And so this, and with this, these works kind of grew in a phenomenological sense, in that there's a dramaturgy to them, and in which there's a climax in the work where each one kind of grows bigger and bigger and bigger. And I can actually play a really quick clip of that just to show you that.
I mean, I think what's I find super incredible about your work, also what makes it really accessible is your own interest in popular culture. So using the documentary form, thinking about, and this is something that you've done in the past, before, using film history, to blur the distinction between reality and fiction, to make the audience themselves think that they're part of a fictional space.
Right.
I'm thinking specifically about the work you did, like Christiana F.
Mm-hmm.
or the Vancouver Expo work, mm-hmm. in which you put posters from the Vancouver Expo, which was I think in 86,
Yeah.
Throughout the city of Vancouver again, to then create almost a glitch for people to think like, is this an event coming up now,
right?
Or is this a poster from the past that I'm, encountering again? So this kind of interaction, the intersection or the friction between reality and fiction and narrative is something that you've been a kind of like through line.
Yeah, it's
in
true.
your work.
Definitely. And these ones, like you're saying, the narrator is implicating you directly. He's speaking from the future, but he's speaking directly at you, and basically assuming that you're in on this with them. But then, like what's happening here, there's always a rupture. There's always a moment where, if you hadn't already figured out this was fake, I give it away. The mono sound becomes surround. They start to glow, and this evolves quite dramatically over the course of the trilogy, because by the second one, it just gets bigger and bigger. And by the third film, I Can See Forever, the climax includes a second projector coming on and flooding the entire wall of the gallery, basically. So there's always like this kind of reveal to it. But yes, implicating, yes.
Yeah, I mean, seeing this work now, it was made, I mean, in terms of, not that the whole world revolves around American politics, but the first Trump presidency.
2014, this is, so yes.
Around.
No, wait, 2016, right?
Yeah, but so the idea of a kind of post-truth, or fake
definitely.
news,
Absolutely,
or to kind of have people think about, or confuse people, gaslight people into understanding what is real as not real.
Yeah,
continues today.
Absolutely,
in the second Trump presidency.
These works are aggressively manipulative. You're presented with all this information that's being kind of given to you as fact, and you're just supposed to receive it. It's kind of an overwhelming amount of information, and because they look authentic, the material. Here, I'll jump to liminals. The material looks, well, it's shot on 16 millimeter, and it's set decked like it's the 1970s, etc. So there's this real. I'm striving to really replicate something that looks like it's from the past, and then yes, it's it's presented as pure fact, basically.
Right.
Even though it's a completely fantastic setup, and yeah.
There's a dimension to this in which we can think about. I mean, it's the question of how to present facts, how to present narrative. How to present truth and reach the truth. There's always a political dimension to that. So we had the pleasure of working together in Denver, Colorado in 2013 for the Biennial of the Americas. And when I invited Jeremy to show something, he showed this kind of poster idea again. And we put around the city these posters of a movie called Over the Edge, which is a film done in the 70s. 80s. About... Or around that.
79, 80.
Early 80s. About a school shooting. And Colorado, of course, Aurora, Colorado, is the site of one of the biggest school shootings. And so by putting up these movie posters about a school shooting that happened fictionally before an actual one, confronted the audiences that didn't even know they were part of a biennial audience, but confronted the people of the city to think about the kind of either the distance they have to a kind of fiction, to reflect on the fiction versus reality, how one is reproducing the other, the kind of the relationship between these two realms, the blurriness between them, and I think within that produces a kind of political position or consciousness within everyone. So I don't know if this is something that you consciously think about, or it's a kind of effect, of your work.
I'm digesting that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely a political element in there. It's not card-carrying political work,
Right.
But I think all these topics carry political weight. When I was doing, you were referencing the Vancouver ones, Expo 86. The reason I was doing those is because they were bringing the Olympics in 2010, and I saw it as I saw the fallout from Expo 86, the World's Fair in Vancouver, as a really negative thing, and they were repeating themselves in 2010, building new stadiums, kicking homeless people out of the downtown core. So that one was very motivated by a political thing as well. Yeah, the Over the Edge one as well, that's an interesting film because it's about urban planning and a development of new homes, like a suburban planning, where they basically forgot about the fact that there was going to be teenagers there. So the teenagers had nothing to do, which sort of evolved into violence. So I was certainly thinking about how that has evolved since then. That was what I can't remember when Aurora was exactly,
But I think to confront people, especially about religion, to think about the truthfulness of it is not something that we think about in terms of belief. So I think by posing those questions through these films, make them so incredibly poignant. Maybe we could look at so the idea of the desire to seek out meaning continues in Phase Shifting Index, which is on view right now at Hamburger Bahnhof in Berlin. So maybe we can look at that a little.
Yeah. So this is.
Or you can describe how it came about and.
Well, basically that trilogy of films, I developed all these different strategies. I mean, you only saw a brief bit of them, but there was this language element. Oh, that was on like auto. Maybe I'll let this play quietly. Basically, I had developed this body of work where I was making these films that looked like they were coming from another era, and yet you had the narrator on top telling you they're from 100, 200 years in the future. There was this strange language they were speaking. There was all these different ideologies being kind of compressed into this singular space. And so with Phase Shifting Index, I decided to kind of explode it into a much more immersive, physical manifestation, really. And so I developed or shot 7 different works that appear to be coming from between the late 1950s to the mid 1990s, where you have 7 different sort of fictional subcultural groups across time who are doing these physically embodied belief systems as a way to attempt to physically alter their reality. And the idea was that the viewer had full autonomy to kind of move through this work. Each work could be viewed from a giant bench there and watched individually as a film. Each one is about 10 to 12 minutes long in a kind of narrative loop. Or you can sit at the back on this huge bank of benches and take it in as a kind of tableau and cacophony of sound. But then I'm going to play like a really condensed edit of how the dramaturgy works here. But they basically, well, you'll see. So it's a 36-minute long piece. This is about a 4-minute edit, and I'll keep talking over it. But basically, at a certain point, that autonomy is revoked. And so, it's this kind of way that you get to choose your way through, pick fragments of these works, and that's how the story unfolds to you. But then I kind of pull that away, and this is really the apotheosis of this body of work, where I'm working towards these cathartic, explosive climaxes in which the viewer becomes implicated in the work and hopefully experiences some similar kind of effect as what's happening on screen.
I think the fact that viewers can walk around the screens, as you said, being implicated is something that we can talk about in terms of this show as well.
Sure, yeah.
And I think this work shows, I guess, your mastery of film media and using kind of historical kind of aesthetics or historical technology, historical media to convey a kind of chronology. Mm-hmm. So if it's something that was shot in the 70s, then we see that kind of represented here, the way that the film might kind of have scratches on it.
Sure, yeah. I mean, the aesthetics are like as authentic as we can go. I mean, I guess there's the 90s, there's the 50s or the late 50s. All on the recording media from Super 8 up to high 8 video, basically.
Oh, so you use the actual...
Yeah, everything is on.
So it's not like edited
physical media
afterwards.
No, it's transferred to the real physical media. So I'm just going to say, each film plays 10 to 12 minutes twice, and then all of a sudden this sort of surround track takes over the space.
We can just watch it.
Yeah. And so then you have this cross-temporal synchronized alignment where everybody on every screen is doing the same choreography across time, basically. And that builds and builds. And then eventually, and then you have a complete rupture of the media itself. So the 16 millimeter, the VHS, etc., rips open into these sort of digital wastelands where everybody, these bodies are pixelating, smashing into each other, and then eventually start to cross over into each other's screens, each other's world, before disintegrating in this kind of synaptic brainwave in the space, which is then joined by lights that are enacted in the ceiling, breaking the fourth wall between the viewer and the audience, and really kind of, again, implicating you in the work, bringing the yeah.
I mean, you ask a lot of your audiences, right?
Yes. I don't know. I mean,
So you
I feel like I give them a lot too.
yeah, of course. But it's work that demands attention, but also demands a kind of buy-in, right, to your narrative, to a kind of attention economy that, like,
Max Stevens once said, you need a suspension of disbelief and belief.
right.
To get into it. You kind of have to either go with it, because if you don't, you're just going to sit there kind of, being like, well, it sucks. This is,
Which is
so fake.
Right. In a way, kind of also the caveat of a religious experience. You have to believe in order for it to work.
Of course.
Or
yes.
like a drug experience. You have to let yourself go in order to attain that feeling, right? I mean, what's interesting too is this idea of synchronicity is something that I also see in this exhibition that you'll all see very soon. I mean, I was thinking about how 2 days ago I was at a studio visit in Berlin of a furniture maker who has been reading a lot about Friedrich Kiesler, and so we had a long conversation about Kiesler. And then yesterday, when I arrived in Vienna, I went to MUMOC, and they had a presentation of Kiesler in the basement area. And then, because I went there before my hotel room was ready. And then when the hotel room was ready, I was put into the Kiesler hotel room. So they named every hotel room a different person. And so I was like, okay, this is, of course, a coincidence. Or it means that I was fated to be here with you on this day, right?
Maybe.
And Kiesler is somehow involved. I don't know how exactly. But I think, what, all to say that, either if everything is predetermined, then there's no free will anyway, or that the human mind is conditioned to see patterns in a way to find meaning in things that are otherwise meaningless, right? So this is what I was thinking about in terms of synchronicity, but what role does it play in your work?
Well, in this piece, it's massive, right? I mean, the whole kind of, to be honest, I was offered this show in the Centre Pompidou, and it's this giant room. And I was like, well, I don't want to do a survey of old work, and I don't really want to build walls. Why does it keep doing that? Stop. And so I decided to make this multi-channel work. Or basically, it was like I'd been working on the trilogy, and I knew I was really happy with the kind of the strategies, the things that had evolved from it. And I just decided, okay, well, then I'm going to make a multi-channel version of it. But then I thought about multi-channel films, and I don't really like multi-channel installation generally. I've never really responded that well to multi-channel work because it never seemed very explicit to me why there needed to be multiple channels. I don't know. This is not, always this case. But anyways, I decided that I needed a reason to have 7 films in a room. There was no I didn't want to just throw work in the womb. And so that came quite quickly, this notion of this alignment and synchronicity and this transtemporal, this notion of nonlinear time and perhaps parallel realities that are, at a somehow crossing over at a certain time. So synchronicity became very important to me actually while working on this work, and became much more prevalent in just my awareness of everything, So with this show specifically, I'm not sure necessarily how much synchronicity plays a part. Are you seeing something that I'm?
Well, the candle synchronized.
True.
At some point, yeah. So that's so there's that.
Yeah, well, that is definitely
Yeah.
the case. That and that work, which you'll see. Should I talk about that work?
Yeah, that's how. I mean, I think about also the technological. I mean, the idea of the singularity. In technology.
Well, and it's the idea of singularity is spoken of many times in the trilogy, right? In the quantification trilogy, that it's the quantum humans are post singularity.
So let's explain singularity a little bit.
The singularity, a point in time where man basically merges with machine. So we've moved past being human and have integrated completely in a harmonious coexistence with machine.
Synchronized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's talked about a lot in those films, in a very, not even speculative, but in a kind of romanticized way, I guess, without really getting into what it is. It's referenced a lot. I use a lot of science lingo and science kind of ideas without really deeply, I don't understand them well enough, I think, to go super deep into them a lot of the time. But I'm very enamored with the language and the way that scientists speak about these very exciting things.
You did a lecture performance.
Yes. I wonder if I have a slide of that.
Yeah, in which you give a lecture about lasers.
Yes.
Yeah. And from what I understand, I mean, you're still not an expert on lasers. But
No, this was a lecture I gave. Oh, it's gonna do that. It's gonna keep doing this. I think this was from when I was really under the clock. Anyways, I gave a lecture, really square, like in this kind of square business outfit, and I was standing behind a podium with slide projections of laser diagrams, etc., like the internal makings of lasers, and I speak in this really deep scientific jargon about laser technology. And so for the first couple of minutes, I'm actually reading proper things. I don't get most of it, but it's really, really
scientific
dense.
papers,
Yeah, very, very dense, but I've kind of combined a lot of them. And after a couple of minutes, I just start kind of mixing things. So the sentences aren't even really making sense anymore at all, but I'm still intoning it like I'm speaking sentences. And this goes on for 10, 12 minutes, and people just, glaze out within a minute. People are just staring blankly at these things. But I continue to uphold this, that I know what I'm talking about. And then at a certain point, I basically turn off my little lamp and press play on whatever it is. And I sing this song called I Am a Laser through a vocoder. So I sound, like a 70s robot, Cylon kind of vocoder. And the song is a song that David Bowie had written for his girlfriend at the time, Ava Cherry. And it's this great song, which eventually became a song called Scream Like a Baby on his Ashes to Ashes record. And then, so the song is 5 minutes long. It's this electronic, quite sad I Am a Laser song. And the laser projections become these green photos. And then after the song is over, I go back to the podium and turn the light back on and go right back into the lecture for 3 or 4 minutes, and then it's over. And that, now that I'm describing that to you, that's really how the films operate in a lot of ways, really, right?
Right.
You're thrown with all this information that is, cobbled from all different places and kind of made into this succinct, autonomous thing. And then eventually, if you wait long enough, there's a payoff, you're gonna get.
But I mean, it brings me back to the New Yorker article in which the boundary between scientism, or things that sound scientific, and religious texts is, also very blurred.
Yeah.
There's a level of submitting oneself to the language whether or not you know what it means, and that's the effect.
And
I think,
faith.
yeah,
There's so much faith involved in both of these
yeah,
sides of the,
yeah.
of the coin.
Faith, devotion, worship,
Absolutely.
addiction, even is ecstasy, part and parcel of both worlds, right? I wonder. I mean, maybe you can talk now that we have an image of you performing,
Sure.
because I want to get to music in a bit. But
Oh, okay.
you were a musician in your former life, and still a musician, and music is a big part of your.
Yeah, I would not call myself a musician, but I made music, definitely.
And you performed them on stages.
I did. And continue to make music. I mean, I work with my best friend Todd Conrad Black on the soundtracks for all the films, and this one in here as well.
I mean,
Yeah.
just to say that the idea of performance, audience, reception, theatricality is all part and parcel of a kind of
Yeah.
DNA of your practice. And what you guys will see also in the votive candles is that there's a soundtrack to that as well. So it's an object, but then at some point there's music that comes out of the candles. And so this idea of a soundtrack to objects is something I'm interested in. It reminds me of another Canadian artist, friend of ours, Lynn Marsh, who had a piece, it's a piece that she did in Oxford, England, in which in a graveyard she installed these spotlights. So at night when people walk through the graveyard, the spotlights will turn on, and then the beginning of Thriller will start playing.
Right.
And so everyone who's walking through the graveyard, it's a very popular shortcut from a point A to point B kind of situation, and becomes part of the Thriller moment. And so somehow by and this reminds me, brings me back to the posters of actual historic events that are then displaced chronologically to again put us into this kind of glitch of, are we within our timeline? Are we within our same
I don't have any here.
narrative?
I thought I would.
But yeah, soundtracks.
Music, yeah. Well, yeah, music is a huge part of, I would say, my inspiration making art, or just in general in life. I think music is kind of the core of a lot of things for me. And it's something that, I did have a music career from around 1997 to 2009. And after that, it just became absorbed into my artwork, really. And it's yeah, it's kind of the most immediate of all these effects, ways to sort of manipulate manipulate's the wrong word, but ways to induce altered states or to trigger emotive response in people. Music is it's kind of like a main line into these reactions. And with this work here, should I speak about that work, or you want to hear more?
Yeah,
about
no,
that?
speak about. I mean, because music is also a big part of religious ceremony too.
Of course, yeah. And I mean, I can't get away from music somehow. It's just really, I made a sculpture, but then there's a musical component. So, I mean, I don't know if I would call that music, but there's a sound element.
Yeah. Do you imagine works with the soundtrack or with music already, or the videos? Obviously, there's
Films.
music.
Yeah, there's definitely I reverse engineer a lot of things as well. To basically making those films is what I want, is that final strobe light climax where people are freaking out and there's a overwhelming soundtrack, and I have to kind of figure out a way to get there. When I first started making work, moving image work, it would be enough just to present the people dancing and just the strobe lights and the music. But yeah, with quickeners and kind of evolving from there, it was like trying to sandwich these big cathartic music video moments within a narrative film and trying to lure people into them in a way so that they were like a kind of a reveal or a rupture. But with sculpture, I don't necessarily think of them. I don't think of soundtracks necessarily, but this one specifically that you will see is a votive candle stand from which you encounter in many churches around the world, Christian churches generally. But what I was thinking of mostly here is the notion of an inanimate object that has so much human faith and piety and hope projected into it. How much human emotion can one object take before it ruptures? And that's what's going on there. And it's not only the candles that align, but to me that would definitely invoke some type of audio. There would be, and of course it could be connected to there's filmic and whatever. There's many historical sort of references to objects that animate, I guess, or become animate. But this one to me is like it's a rupturing. It's basically opening up, again, becoming the wormhole.
The a lot of your work has people in them. In fact, most, I mean, at least in the last 10 years, people and, the experience of people is a big part of the work. This show doesn't have any people
No.
in them. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the book has people.
Yes.
Can you tell us about this kind of divide now?
Yeah, that was really. That was really intentional. Was when we started thinking about the book. The book had to be ready for the opening, and these are playing arbitrarily, but they kind of connect with what I'm talking about. The book had to be ready for the opening, and yet it's impossible to have documentation photos if you have to have the book ready for the opening, and none of these works were made yet. So I kind of made a conscious decision to really separate the book from the exhibition, and knowing that the exhibition was going to be devoid of the corporeal representation, I decided to make a book that is only corporeal representation. And so it's really just acknowledging that that difference between, that there's these two sides of my practice now that really coexist. And I think you were already mentioning this to me, but I think the audience becomes that corporeal element in this show, rather than me presenting images of people or, So these works, you become
Right. I mean,
you enact them, or you sort of enact.
yeah. I mean, I think the whereas the posters around the city very explicitly kind of incorporate the audience into the work, I think this one realizes it at some point. So as you walk into the exhibition, you'll see the stained glass, and then you'll see benches on facing the stained glass. But you'll also notice that within the stained glass, on the other side of the stained glass, there are also benches that you can't actually access. And so to me, this implicates the audience's imagination. When you see furniture, chairs, tables, benches, you immediately imagine a body occupying them. And so by using the bench as a kind of sign for potential of occupancy, I think we see the idea is that you see yourself behind the stained glass or occupying that space of the stained glass. You've done stained glass works before, but not like this.
No, I've never made such a large scale triptych like this. Yeah.
You can tell us, a bit more about the stained glass
About
work
that
before
work?
we see the works ourselves in the next 5 minutes.
Well, that work is really a very explicit combination of religious, a religious ornament, I guess, a religious, the stained glass window, the representation of the divine light, the kind of closeness to God, the used oftentimes to tell biblical stories or even enforce religious authority in a lot of ways. And then again, you have this representation of the wormhole kind of combining with it. So it's this popular or scientific representation of one reality to another, and they're just basically completely combined here as a way to, I don't know, perhaps hint at some sort of belief system, modernist belief system. I'm not sure exactly, but it's really just a kind of a I don't know.
I mean, windows are portals.
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's a very explicit representation of these things. It's this flat, two-dimensional version using antiquated technologies to, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think with that, description of the actual exhibition, maybe I'll invite everyone to go see the exhibition
Wow.
across the hallway. So thank you very much.
Thanks.